I think this is a great follow-up to what Anurag just talked about, where he showed us the perspective of what is the government looking for when they say, how do you create a movement? And I think the last thing that he said, that the government can create the appetite. It's for all of us to take it forward and actually make that a movement. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about a little today, as all of us as players in the ecosystem. What do we need to do to take this appetite and make it into a real movement, right? So before we start, I'd just like all of the panel members to give a quick introduction about yourself, and then we'll get started. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here amongst this august audience. So my name is Upendra Rabindran, and I'm from Piramal Foundation. Having had a stint of about 4 to 5 years of operations in the foundation, right now I look after the talent strategy of the foundation for a particular business vertical. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kavita Tatwadi, and I represent an organization called AVPN. We are a network of funders and social investors, and I head the impact measurement and management vertical.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's again a pleasure to be here. So I'm Chetan Kapoor, and my association with Edumentum and Mantra is what brings me here today, which is now almost about a decade old. I, of course, work as the CEO of Tech Mahindra Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here again. I think before we get into the specific aspects, an open question from my side would be, we've been talking a lot about this Samaaj Sarkar Bazaar collaboration to really make movements work. So what is it that you believe will actually work with this collaboration? Like, why do you think a collaboration like this is going to accelerate movements rather than any other type of movement? How is collaboration a powerful tool for creating movement? And this is for all of you, maybe. Any way you want.
So to me, Pratibha, what comes to my mind is Lagan. The way Amir Khan was rallying a team. There was a collective pain, a collective struggle, a collective hurt, but there was an objective, there was a purpose. They never knew what cricket was. They knew it was a plank of wood and a ball. So to me, at the moment, having heard people for the last 2 days here, and of course, coming from the space, I think the previous speaker just spoke, are we diagnosing the problems right? So if we are today in a position to understand that collective pain of a particular community, then I think the collective will fall in place. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So this is a pertinent question for us in AVPN. We believe that any kind of movement can only be supported through collaboration. No single person or a single organization can achieve systems level impact if they're doing it alone. And the biggest thing that we think is trust in collaboration. And the biggest challenge we see in trusting is letting go of. Because when you have to come together for a bigger purpose, there's something that you'll have to also let go of. If you have to hold somebody else's hand, you'll have to give your hand to them. And since most of us are educators here, I'll give an example, very small one. We've all learned about organic chemistry and how organic molecules are formed. Carbon and hydrogen come together to form an organic molecule. And in this collaboration, carbon still remains carbon, hydrogen still remains hydrogen, but they have to give away 1 electron each. And the power of giving this away makes the organic molecule an altogether different level impactful. So trust and letting go is very important for collaboration.
Thank you, ma'am. that analogy very much appeals to the scientist in me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think wonderful examples both, the Lagan example as well as this one. But I think, there isn't actually should be a need to make a case for collaboration. I think for all of us who've been working in this space, it should be pretty obvious that collaboration is the only way in which you can even attempt to take a step towards solving the problem. Okay, a lot of organizations in the past who have tried to say that, hey, I can solve this by myself, have not worked, irrespective of their size. Even the government itself acknowledges that there needs to be an active participation of the civil society for us to show a few replicable models that can help us solve the way. Therefore, there is actually no need to even say that collaboration is important. Of course it is important. Not just important, I think collaboration is the only way. Collaboration is the only way to go. All the things that were mentioned in terms of what are the ingredients of this collaboration, we all understand that. I would underscore the importance of respect here, more than trust actually. Because trust is the outcome of a number of steps, all of which need to be imbued with a sense of respect. With this understanding that this respect is important, even if I might disagree what the other person is telling me. This respect is important irrespective of the fact that the approach that I am taking to solve the same problem might be very different from somebody else is taking, and yet respect is important. Because in my so many years, I've seen, and of course I represent a funding organization, but I've seen funders and donors put themselves on a pedestal and ask the NGOs that, this is how you need to do it. That's not what respect is all about. So I would underline and underscore the importance of respect and the importance of collaboration.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I think respect has been a recurring theme of conversations over the past 2 days. Many, many speakers have talked about dignity and respect as being the bedrock of creating collaboration. And because sir touched upon the idea of the funders' role and their position in this whole movement, I want to just bring in ma'am here to understand what are certain ways in which currently philanthropy and funders operate in terms of orchestrating such movements, and what are shifts that they would need to make towards this more respectful and trust-based culture of creating funding opportunities for partners and organizations. What would be those key shifts that would be required from your perspective?
Thank you for asking me this question. Since we are a network of funders and social investors, we have a vantage point of view to see what's happening all over Asia. And the biggest two things that we're now seeing is that collaborative philanthropy as well as trust-based philanthropy is something which is coming up. More and more funders are gathering together to understand and learn how this is happening. And for AVPN, this is very important, and we are big proponents of collaborative philanthropy as well as trust-based philanthropy. So what we mean by trust-based philanthropy is that funders, just because they have resources, should not try and intervene in the programmatic aspects of the implementing organizations. So the major shift that we want to see and we try and convince most of the funders to do is to trust the experts to do their job well. I'll give you a small example. If you are having a stomach ache, would you go and tell a doctor that, oh, I'm having cancer, so please take these 3 steps, do a surgery, and if on the time you see there's going to be some different change required, wake me up and take my approval and only then go ahead and do that surgery. But this is what we exactly do with most of the grantee partners. So we see that they need to be nimble on the ground. They work very closely with the communities, and things on the ground change very, very suddenly. And the grantee partners do not have time to come back to the funders to make the changes in the agreement, because as most of us here have spoken, that time is an important resource. And if we're looking at education, if there's a certain requirement for a grantee partner to be working differently on the ground than what they had agreed with a funder, they don't have time to come back to the funder to make the changes in the agreement, because during those 1 or 2 months, the child would have gone out of the hands. So this trust is very important. So please give them that ability to do that. And at AVPN, we have some pool funds where we have brought together a lot of funders to pool in their resources to address some of the pertinent problems in Asia. And one of our pool funds is the STEM Education for Girls Pool Fund, and Mantra for Change is one of our grantees. And what we do in that is we give out unrestricted grants. And because we trust the grantee organization to know how to utilize the grants on the ground, we don't prescribe any activities they should tie the grant to. They are free to use those grants in the way they want. In terms of M&E, so does trust-based philanthropy mean that you don't have to do any kind of M&E? No, of course not. It's not that you write a check and you forget about it. But M&E does not mean numbers. It's not about numbers only that you can report in a very polished report. Impact is a lot about qualitative aspects as well. There are so many ways you can measure impact. You have to understand that. Go and do your research to understand that. And what we have seen with all of our grantees who've received unrestricted grants is that we only do 2 check-ins with them to understand how they're doing the implementation, and is there some challenge they're facing where we could support them more. And what we have realized is they themselves are taking up the responsibility to do the M&E well and come back and report to us, though it's not a mandatory requirement for them. So I think it's very important that more and more funders now start trusting the organizations that work on the ground instead of meddling in their programmatic aspects.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a refreshing perspective from a funder to hear. But calling from what ma'am said about the responsibility of the funder to be more trust-based and respectful, I want to bring in Chetan sir to understand what is the responsibility of the organization in such a process, and especially when there are multiple organizations collaborating towards this movement, how does each of their roles come to play? What are they supposed to be doing? And what are they to be held accountable to create this movement?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, it's important for me to say that at Tech Mahindra Foundation, at least what I'd like to believe and what I tell my team is that we look upon ourselves as an NGO that also funds. So first, we are, as much of a non-government organization as any of the organizations, because evolved philanthropy means that whatever that your funding effort is going towards is something which is directed towards a specific goal. So it's important that in the process of setting that goal, you have a deep understanding of what is it that you're trying to change. So we do start any intervention with a theory of change, with a belief that, okay, this is what we are trying to move the needle on. And it's possible that in some cases, there isn't an alignment with an NGO who has come to us looking for funds, and that's how it is. Because if we are very clear that we would want to move the needle on the idea of having better quality paramedics, for example, that's something that we are doing a deeper dive on as far as our work in skill development is concerned. But there could be a very good organization which may not be working in this area. So be it. So at least having that a clear vision of what is it that you're trying to move is important. And based on that, we forge our partnerships. We would like to believe that, yes, of course, we would never want to meddle with the processes, but setting an agenda together and bringing to the table whatever that we can to add value is something which we should be doing. So again, from the funders' perspective, I'll give you the example of when we initiated the skill development program called SMART, we realized that having a strong linkage with the market, with the companies where we would want the students to ultimately get jobs in, is an area where we could support the NGOs more, because many of them did not have that necessary connect with the corporates to facilitate placement. So we stepped in terms of saying that, okay, here is how you could sort of approach the HRs of various companies where we would want our smart students to go. So not meddle, but add value is definitely something that we would do. Again, staying from the funders' perspective. Coming to the NGO side, what is it that we would expect from organizations? See, so when I spoke about respect, and I mentioned that funders tend to sometimes, have this attitude of putting themselves on a pedestal, but I've seen it the other way around as well. I've seen that there are NGOs who believe that आप funder हो, आपका काम है पैसा देना, बाकी हमें जो करना है करने दो. So again, it's a question of where is my place on this table? Am I being, as a funder, treated at least as an equal? And where we see a problem in that equation, we have a problem. So just as all funders have to ensure that the essential element of respect and whatever that the organization has managed to achieve in the community is sort of respected and given due attention to. But in the similar vein, if there is a funder which has certain strengths that it can bring to the table, that should also be looked at. Of course, I mean, all of us who are on the funding side, especially on the CSR front, are actually facing nothing short of a battle when it comes to the entire compliance and regulatory processes that have been kind of that have been around. And over here, of course, there is this expectation that the NGO partners who we are working with understand why these compliances are there in the first place and what it takes to make sure that you support us in terms of adhering to those compliances. In fact, let me share the framework that we've started using to look at the relationship that we have with our partners, which is what I call the IAAP framework, which stands for intent, alignment, attitude, and process. So if you go down the scale, if we see that there's a problem with intent, then there could be an immediate exit, because intent is core, right? If we feel that the data that comes back to us is not being reported correctly, if there are problems over there, or if there are problems in the financial reports, then that kind of alludes to a problem with the intent, and therefore we take that very, very strictly. Second, as I mentioned, is the alignment part, which is important because there is a certain agenda, there is a certain goal that we would want to achieve, and of course that is where the meeting of minds truly needs to happen. There are cases where we begin a relationship with the belief that there is alignment, but down the line we feel that there seems to be a problem. In this case, we do try and have as many discussions as are required to ensure the continuity of the project. But there have been cases where, because of the alignment issue, we've not been able to take a relationship forward. The third is the attitude part, which is what I mentioned earlier about, sometimes our people who go in, into a project team from Tech Mahindra Foundation feels that it is not, being adequately listened to, or, we speak about something and we try and emphasize why this is important. But if it repeatedly comes back to us that, hey, this is not what is actually happening there. So of course, there is a long time before we disassociate because of an attitudinal issue. And finally, it is the process which is critical in terms of what we are doing, and therefore we the approach has always been to support in whatever way that we can to improve processes at the organization's end. We're working with some very small organizations as well, where we understand that there could be limitations in terms of putting the processes to a certain point. That is where our HR, our finance team, our communication teams, our L&D team, they all support as much as is required. But there again, we've seen that sometimes, despite repeatedly working with them, we find utilization certificates coming way late than what they should be. We find that there are serious issues when it comes to basic processes that need to be managed, and therefore we don't have a choice at that stage. So that's broadly a framework that we've created, which I thought will be something which sort of helps to answer your question.
Absolutely. I think while that framework specifically answers the relationship between a funder and a grantee, I think it's also a great framework for collaboration in general. To get people on a table, these are the 4 things that we would essentially look for. So for even a movement like Shikshāgraha to succeed, when all of us partners come together, I think these are the 4 ideas of intent, of alignment, of attitude, and of the process coming together is what would succeed such a movement. So I think this applies at all levels. So thank you for sharing that, sir. And just picking out one of these pieces which I found interesting, which was the attitude. And I think that has a lot to do with the people who come up on this, who show up. And essentially, everyone who's part of this movement is in some way or the other a leader, and therefore their competencies are really important to driving and sustaining this movement. So I wanted to bring in Upendra sir here to understand what type of leadership will it take to drive such a movement at mass and at scale, and not just top-down leadership, because I remember yesterday we talked about this, that it's not just the people who make the rules, but everyone who's at the grassroots. What is their leadership supposed to be like to drive such a movement to success?
Thank you. So if I have to put in a nutshell what Chetan talked about or Kavita talked about, it's on one end you have the funds, resources, and then you have a kind of a strategy, and at the end of it, it's all impact and outcome. For want of a better word, there is a beneficiary out there in the ecosystem. Now, if you look at the thing that we're talking on, it's strengthening a local network. Not even local, it's hyper-local. So if you go down to maybe a block level, a panchayat level, or even a district, there is a small NGO there who's already doing something really good, but there can be something better. There is a woman who's part of an SHG, a self-help group. There is something really working, wonders. Magic is there. But there can be something more organized, institutional. There's a youth, highly aspiring, wants to be the change maker in the community, wants a nudge, wants a push. Can he do better? So the question is, I mean, you have so on and so forth. You have a faith-based leader, you have the representatives from the Panchayati Raj, then you have the volunteers who come in on their own. Of course, not to forget the media, the local media, the vernacular. Now, the moment you talk of, say, strengthening, means there's already something existing. You're trying to change something. The moment you talk of change, coming to the attitude bit which Pratibha was talking about, there is an element of behavior. The moment behavior comes into play, there's a fear. Because the moment you say change, it's about me wanting to build a new skill, a new competency, a new mindset, which I'm not used to overnight. If something has to change in the system. So the fear comes in. And because of the fear, there's a resistance to change. So if you look at attitude, what Chetan was talking about, if you go into a framework, if you actually want to dive into a framework of attitude, there are 3 elements to it. One is cognitive. The second is affective. And the third is behavior. Which means, when I, Upendra, see something in front of me today, there is a meaning that I make of my ecosystem. which affects me because of my own value system, my own beliefs, my own mindsets, the baggage I carry, the experiences I carry, because of which I have a behavior. So when, say, an NGO, or when somebody like a bigger NGO enters a district, what you see is the front end, the behavior. Do you know the story behind? Like the previous speaker was just talking about. Do you know what their story is? If you look at that local NGO, if you look at that local SAG, hyper-local, if you look at the youth, they do know where the shoe pinches. We are not yet in their shoes. But are we able to get into the shoes and know where the shoe is pinching? I think that's where leadership comes in. That's where leadership comes in. So is it possible, like we've been hearing over a period of time over the last 2 days, if we have to impact the mindset of a beneficiary, again for want of a better word, of a beneficiary, are we able to get down to the emotional plane rather than the cognitive plane? Justin was talking to us yesterday. He was on the stage yesterday. The why of it. If you go back to Simon Sinek's TED Talk, the why is very important because the why hits the emotional aspect. The what and how we know. It's a cognitive element. So is it possible for the leaders who want to create this collective to create more clones, I mean, again, for want of a better word, within the system, within the ecosystem? So is it possible, as part of the strengthening, rather than inventing a solution in these ecosystems where we are, can we discover solutions? Because the solutions are there within them. So can we make them a part of the diagnosis of the problem? Can we make them a part of the diagnosis of the problem? Get to understand. Like yesterday, somebody was talking of the deworming affecting the student learning outcome. Phenomenal. They knew the problem. A red carpet from the gate, the main gate, the big gate being opened and taking you to the classroom. Emotional component, not cognitive. So is it possible that we make them a part of the diagnosis of the problem? And because now they know what the problem is, like Lagan, the example that I gave, there's a collective pain, there's a collective hurt, there's a collective challenge. So can we focus them onto what is a collective vision that they want to have? To solve the pain, to solve the hurt. Now, as a leader, fair enough, there's a collective vision. It's a moral purpose because the why has been answered. Now can we foster their concern for the same vision which they have created? And once you foster the concern for this vision, can we foster the competency building, skilling them up? A small NGO might need a little bit of organization development, but if I go and tell organization development, they'll look blank at me. What are you talking about? हमें तो पता ही नहीं है. Institution building, procedures. Do they know how to put up a proposal to the district collector? They're doing a lot of wonderful job, but do they know numbers? Are they taking decisions based on numbers? Are they able to convince the district collector that we have observed a pattern and this is where we want to intervene? Do they have the competency? May not be. So can we intervene there? Now, when all this is achieved, can we bring in the cohesion? So if you have a moral purpose, if you have the understanding of the moral purpose, if you understand the change, then I think the collective falls in place automatically. Like Maya Angelou had said, a very famous quote, they may not remember what you said. They may not remember what you did. But they'll definitely remember how you made them feel when you were there. So I think if I've answered the question, Pratibha.
Perfect. Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much for that perspective of setting a common vision, getting everyone aligned to that, and then building the necessary skills for us to work towards that vision is how we will orchestrate movements going forward. Because we're running short on time, I'm not going to be able to open it up to the audience, but the panelists will be around during lunch, and so you will get to interact with them. And I wouldn't want to stand between you and lunch, but I have just one quick question, exactly picking off the thread that Upendra sir mentioned, is what is your vision for Shikshāgraha as a movement? Very quick thoughts. And what would be some quick wins or immediate successes that you would really love to see through this movement happen that would make you feel excited about it? So very quickly, if we can hear from all of you about this.
Okay, so let me take that. For me, definitely the quick win part that you mentioned, Pratibha, I think increasingly it's becoming more and more clear that when we are thinking of, when we are envisaging a collective such as Shikshāgraha, and as has been stated earlier many times, that while it's a common problem that we are trying to address, but the solutions that you are all finding within your own spheres of work, you know, whether it is a small district in Arunachal, which I just came to know of what the organization sitting there is doing, or what Vidya Vidya is doing in Tamil Nadu, you know, very different parts. So each of you are trying to find solutions to the same large challenges in your own ways. But what is important as a quick win for you to quickly converge on how do you share, especially share data, especially share stories of change and data, so that the drops that you're working at, you know, at various parts of the country begin to coalesce and come together so that a larger narrative around Shikshāgraha can be created.
Perfect, perfect. Creating that collective wisdom. Kavita ma'am.
For me, I think my vision for Shikshāgraha is that this should become a worldwide movement. And the starting itself, the beginning itself, looks like it's going to happen very soon. And the vision that I have for how to bring about this change, and since I come from a funders network, I would want more funders to come together to catalyze this change happening with the movement.
Perfect, thank you. So from local to global is what our aspiration is.
So to me, I think it simply boils down to a mindset movement and a hyper-local collaborative at the district level, at the block level, at the panchayat level, and any institution in that particular ecosystem. If this can get scaled, a kind of a dominoes, I think that's my thought of a collective today.
Perfect.